I didn't get to talk about the Holger Rune injury on this week's Monday Match Analysis, so I want to do so now. First and foremost, I am gutted for Holger. That was terrible to see, and I'm wishing him a speedy recovery, and I hope he's back as soon as possible and stronger than ever, because there's nothing worse than severe injury in sports. Now, normally the conversation might end there, but Jack Draper took to Twitter to presumably react to the situation. Most people have probably seen this. But he said, injuries are going to happen. We are pushing our bodies to do things they aren't supposed to do in elite sport. We have so many incredible younger guys on the tour right now, and I'm proud to be a part of that. However, the tour and the calendar have to adapt if any of us are going to achieve some sort of longevity. Taylor Fritz backed him up. Fritz said facts. Also seeing more injuries and burnout now than ever before because balls, courts, conditions have slowed down a lot, making the weekly grind even more physically demanding and tough on the body. So I got to start here. I want to address what Fritz said and what Draper said, and I want to address it fully. But first, I want to say that using the Rune injury as a springboard for this conversation was a little odd to me. With the context, something that I've been thinking about a lot, and in fairness, Jack probably wouldn't have been thinking about this, Taylor probably wouldn't have been thinking about this, but Achilles injuries are like a way larger trend issue across sports. It has been a massive problem. In the NFL, data shows that Achilles tears in particular have been up between 300 and 500% in the last few seasons compared to the average over the course of about 30 years. In the NBA, the average since around the 70s is about 1.3 per season. Last year, there were 7 Achilles tears in the NBA. There has been something going on here that is worth looking into, worth studying. There are a lot of plausible explanations, but you just hope that that's not making its way over towards tennis. In the last 2 years, Storm Sanders did her Achilles, Lucas Pouille tore his, and now Holger Rune. That's 3 in the last 2 years. Kind of feels like a lot because I don't really recall this being an injury that pops up all that frequently at all on the tour until this point. So just knowing that this is like a big thing across multiple sports, it makes it hard to be like, oh, torn Achilles, okay, that's because of the calendar, right? That's never really how I'm going to digest it, knowing the larger context of this particular injury. In addition to the fact that ligament tears are an unavoidable part of sports. And I said this after Dimitrov had his terrible injury at Wimbledon, but luckily tennis doesn't really have the worst of it. It's more frequent, more common in other sports, particularly UCL tears, which is the elbow for baseball pitchers, is a total epidemic. I mean, it's out of control. So luckily tennis isn't plagued to that extent by these ligament tears. But, you know, usually ligament tears in sport are not used as like proof that there's something broken or something wrong. It's just like it happens, freak thing, it happens. Which, in fairness, Jack did start his thing off. So, throw that aside, okay? Because I did find it weird that Rune's injury was the springboard for the conversation, but I'm just going to throw that aside and let's take what they actually had to say at face value. Because the sentiment from Draper and Fritz that the season is too long, that it is brutality on the players, we've heard it out of Iga's mouth, we've heard it out of Carlos Alcaraz's mouth, and the list goes on. This is a pretty common, widespread belief across the locker room. I don't know how far down the rankings it extends, but it's a pretty widespread belief that the season is way too long for anybody's own good, right? And for that reason, and that reason alone, I think the ATP has to look at options for placating the players' concerns. Actually shortening the season, that kind of feels, at least from my vantage point, as like basically a bridge too far. There's two things. First off, you have tournament stakeholders who obviously want to hold their tournaments. And these are partners of the tour. So first of all, it's very hard to just take tournaments away from the calendar because the tournaments are business partners and stakeholders of the tour. Second off, I think there are lower ranked players who need the 11 months. And third, if you leave a gap in the calendar, you allow entities to fill in the gap. Your UTSs of the world, your Six King Slams of the world, the exhibition that happens every year in Abu Dhabi, like essentially world team tennis in the past. If you leave a space, folks, the space will be filled. And the players will, if there's enough money on the line, they will show up. That's what's going to happen. And where will we be? We'll be right where we started. That is the belief on the tour. And you know what? I think that is true. But that said, I'm pro player. When enough of the players are saying this, the ATP should try to placate those concerns. So how do they do that? Because I think actually shortening the calendar is probably unrealistic. You can take away these bonus pools, figure out a way to distribute the money in another way, right? The reason why they have implemented bonus pools is obviously to incentivize the players to play the 500s. That's why the bonus pool is there. It's an incentive. But that's a choice. That's a policy decision. I think there might be some flexibility there to perhaps rethink that so the players don't feel as if there's a massive financial consequence to skipping tournaments. Maybe they could take away the mandatory status of Masters 1000s and tweak the rankings so that there's less of a penalty for skipping tournaments. Essentially, I think what can be done here, what actually can feasibly be done, not shortening the calendar. To me, it's not feasible. It sounds great in theory. To me, it's not feasible. What actually is feasible, I think, is to make it easier for players to skip more tournaments. But still, you're going to have stakeholders upset. You are going to have your tournament business partners lobbying hard against those changes. And obviously, the way tennis governance is, you've got a lot of different stakeholders. You've got, in a lot of ways, 50-50 tug of war, fight between power, and usually change is very difficult to come by because you actually need a lot of people to agree in order for a change to be made. I am telling you right now that the reform necessary for making it easier for players to skip tournaments, there's not going to be widespread agreement on a change like that. The tournaments will fight against it. So this is a pretty tough situation, huh? I think the ATP needs to at least make a little bit of an effort here. But by the way, they might not. They might not. I want to point out that this is not a new concern. I was talking to Paul Anacone today at Tennis Channel. He's been around. He's been around for a little bit. He told me, Gill, they've been talking about this for 40 years, that the calendar is too long. So the noise level, the decibel level might ebb and flow, get louder and quieter. And right now it's loud, but it's nothing new. And we're still here. So I'll throw that out there, food for thought. The other thing, and this gets into really kind of pushing back and looking at the details of what Draper and Taylor Fritz actually said. They're both saying that injuries are becoming more common, that injuries are up. Does the data support this? It's a question. I don't know. I'm saying it's possible that that's not true. I haven't seen the data. 2, are rallies actually getting longer? Taylor Fritz says the conditions are getting slower and that's making it more physical. There should be numbers that flesh this out. Again, I tried to go through this, and for 2025, I'm very excited to see what the numbers say at the end of the season, because maybe they'll show us something. But again, rally length statistically is not up. We looked at every year from 2016 to 2024. It's not up. Okay? The data courtesy of Tennis Viz and TDI, Tennis Data Innovations. Rally length is not up. Hold rate is not down. And to address Draper's claim directly, is longevity actually being threatened right now? Is player longevity actually being threatened? If it were, that would be really bad for the tour. That would be an existential threat. Do you know how much money everybody would have lost if Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic crapped out at 30 years old? Whew. Boy, that would have been pretty different for everybody, right? It is in the tour's best interest that Alcaraz and Sinner play until they're 38. So if conditions were changing to a point where it was actually taking away from longevity, that would be serious. But is there evidence that that's the direction that we're trending? Is there evidence that longevity is currently under threat? The numbers might even show the opposite. I don't know. It is tricky with that one because obviously it takes a long time for those things to be fleshed out. So that's a trickier one to study. But, the tour might be looking at the things that Jack and Taylor are saying, and they might be like, nope, that's not what we're seeing. Disagree. And they might have an argument, depending on what the numbers actually say. And look, I feel like the Grinch for pushing back on any of this. I do. I want to just be with the players here. You got to understand that it's the way I'm wired. And the reason I'm wired this way is because in my mind, I have no credibility. I'm a nobody. Okay? So everything I say has to be supported with example, with examples, with evidence, with data. The way I am wired because of this is that I'm always looking for this is the claim and you prove it. And that's why I look for the proof side of things, because I'm not Taylor Fritz. What I say at face value doesn't freaking matter unless I back it up. That's the difference. So I have actually looked, again, midway through the year, I tried to back up these claims that the conditions are slowing down, and I failed to do so with the data. The data didn't show me that. And that's where, again, I will continue to investigate. I'm not going to give up. I want to prove the players right. I genuinely do. I'd love to find evidence, hard numerical evidence, that things are slowing down. I haven't found that in the numbers yet. If I get the chance to speak with Taylor, I'll ask him about this, because I love him as a tennis mind, and I'd love to know what he thinks of the fact that rally length statistically, maybe this has changed in 2025, but up until 2024 hasn't gone up and hold rate hasn't gone down. One more point before I wrap, another angle that has to be explored. Taylor Fritz's schedule has been crazy. What he has put his body through, unbelievable. Unbelievable. It is amazing that he has not crumbled into a million pieces. Deep run at the U.S. Open, Davis Cup the week after, Laver Cup the week after that, Tokyo, Shanghai. And this is in months 9 and 10 of the season, when you've already accumulated a lot of mileage, and wear and tear. Like, that's a ton, especially if you take the travel into account. Davis Cup, he wants to represent his country. It's close to home in Delray Beach. The U.S. had some injured players, Shelton, and were there others, or was it just Ben? I think there might have been another injury that made things kind of tricky for Team USA. They definitely would have wanted Taylor's services. Hard to pass that up, Very hard not to play that. Laver Cup in San Francisco, If you're Taylor Fritz, that's hard to say no to. And I'm sure in hindsight, he's glad he was there. Tokyo, that happens to be Taylor Fritz's favorite tournament, and he wants that bonus pool money. Got to play 5 ATP 500s over the course of the year in order to qualify for that. Shanghai, now we're back to a mandatory. So Taylor wanted to play all of those events, and understandably, but he did play 3 optional events. Francis Tiafoe isn't injured. He said peace out on the season. Not interested. Going to take a longer offseason. He's not injured. That's his choice. Jannik Sinner said no thanks to Laver Cup and no thanks to Davis Cup. Taylor Fritz chose to play it. And I don't think that's down to money. I don't think that's down to Sinner being number one. That's just down to like personal preference, personal desire. So this is also where the tour has some ability to push back on a player like Fritz saying, look at what I've done here. This is crazy. It's like, yeah, it is crazy what you've done. That is crazy. If you wanted to make a sacrifice, both financially and maybe when it comes to just missing an event that you'd really love to play, that option was available to you. I haven't seen that retorted or effectively shut down from the player standpoint, other than to say, we're trying to make as much money, maximize the finances. But, that's what a lot of this also comes down to. As I always say, it's a decision here where it's like more play, more money, less play, less money. And there's a lot of decisions that can be made, but it's all trade-offs. All right. So those are my thoughts on this topic at the moment, but it's not a topic, as Paul Anacone pointed out, we'll probably be talking about this 10 years from now. So to be continued. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.